All right. Just make sure all the tech is on. Yep, the tech looks good. Guys, give me just 1 second.
Hey, Christian.
Hey, Stephanie, how's it going? Can you hear me okay?
Oh, yeah. Loud and clear in Costa.
Awesome, awesome. Costa Rica, huh? How's that? Oh, do you guys live there?
We have property here, so then our retreat is here. So
Yep, yeah, you got a great offer. That's gonna be a good one. Yeah, all right.
stop to come lay.
Absolutely, absolutely. All right, very good to see everybody. This is always a fun part where we're letting people in. So I'm just gonna do that for a few more seconds. And then we'll get right into it. Just to kind of preface this call here, we're gonna be going into how to find the right people. And essentially, that's kind of like a cool marketing title, but the real thing and the more logical one is how do we look and interview the right and then hire the right people, right? And we're gonna go over the exact philosophies that we have inside of our companies, along with the actual interview steps that we take for two different departments. We'll do it for the sales team, which is pretty relevant for both setters and closers. Same process can be applicable, along with we can call it a client success team. You're essentially your account managers, the people who communicate between your client and your team, right? The fulfillment team, essentially, the contractors that are doing the work. So we'll get right into that. And there's going to be quite a few things. And I'll just make sure I share that document so you don't have to be scrambling to type down or write down notes. I know I'm kind of like that. And then I'll be able to show you guys how to track that as well, which is going to be really fun. All right. And if at any time you guys have any questions, please just unmute. I'm completely fine with that. Just go ahead and stop me. And I'm happy to answer those questions. All right, let me just start by sharing my screen so you guys can see correctly. All right. Just a thumbs up if you guys see a cool document that says how to interview and hire. Perfect. Appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Okay, so again, the main thing we're going to be going over is again the logical steps that we take on how to interview and hire, again, specifically for our sales and account management departments. Account managers, that's just again the relationship between your clients and your team. So very similarly, kind of like we have our own, we call them CSM advisors, right? Which would be like Chris or Kyle that you guys have. Same thing, same over those exact steps that we take to interview them. And Chris is in here, so he'll be able to share his experience, most likely having gone through with us. Again, we're going to go over the philosophy, right, which is the high level. So even if you are having this done for you, you'll be able to understand what it is that's going on behind the scenes, right? How our team thinks and how our management team thinks when we're looking at hiring, whether it be a setter or a closer, whoever it may be. And then we'll also go over the specific steps for those of you that might be doing it yourself, so that way you understand and can start to map out a process and what that might look like for you. And again, take it with, I don't remember something, the saying is something around like the grain of salt. Whatever the saying is, just take our process and be able to edit it to what you want to ideally do, what you look for, how do you want to build your business, right? Because at the end of the day, we all have different businesses. Every agency is different. Every owner has different philosophies and thought processes. So take this and build on it, essentially, right? And you'll want two things that you'll notice is that we optimize for number one, effectiveness. So how can we be as effective, meaning get the most information and learn the most about an individual through the interview process and still be efficient with it, right? Because we don't want to spend too much time, because what you do is then you're kind of taking away your time from what could be revenue generating activities, right? Which is what we really like to stress. And then you're doing interviews, and as important as it is, you got to be able to make some money. So you want to be doing the revenue generating activities. So how can we be efficient, but also effective? Because what you also don't want to do is you don't want to tire people out. Like if you've ever been in an interview for, maybe a lower level position and the process is just super long, it just gets tiring. You're like, do I even want this anymore? Like, do I really want this? So you also you want to be mindful of that, right? You want to think about it from both parties. And what you'll also notice is we like to hire what's called inside out, which means we start inside of our own circles and the people that we know, and then we move our way out, right? So ideally, the question is always like, do you promote from within, or do you promote or like hire from outside? Ideally, you want to be inside your circle, which means, whether it be a team member or even team members, if they can give you referrals, I mean, that's always ideal, right? And then you just work your way out, and we'll kind of go over a couple of examples, whether that be, Facebook posts, there's some certain groups that you can go to. and then LinkedIn, right? You can run some ads, things like that. So, all right. So what we'll start with is essentially what we look for, right? That's probably the biggest thing you want to do first. So on sales, and again, whether it's being done for you or you're doing yourself, these are some things to consider and just understand. So there's really three, we call it the alignment triad. Actually, I'll just type it here so that way you guys see that. So we'll call it the alignment triad. And essentially, we want to make sure that we have interviews and find people within the sales team who align with our offer. So what it is that we're offering. And for you guys, obviously with your agency, you want to make sure that they understand and kind of have that experience. Then that they align with the sales process, right? Do they understand and know how to close, right? Do they have the experience? And specifically with your industry too, because somebody who may have done door to door, it might be a little bit of a transition to go high ticket online sales, right? Closing. And then last but not least is alignment with the market. Right now, these are some scenarios considering those three alignments and kind of what we want people to kind of be have experience in and when we're looking for them. There's four different scenarios that we kind of look for. Now, number one, scenario A is more of a rare one where somebody has experience in sales, they align and understand what you're offering, and they also understand and know your market. Right, so that's a little bit more difficult to find. This means that somebody has experience and has been closing and is able to make a lot of money. Then they also understand and know your offer. Maybe you have closed for it before, and they also understand your industry and your market, right? Meaning, whoever it is that you're going after, and they understand the pain points, like all of this right off the bat. This is somebody who's like super fast, and you can bring them on board pretty much like immediately. But typically, you might, and again, these are they're labeled from most to least desirable. So obviously, that's the most desirable, but it's also the most rare. The next one is when somebody aligns with your offer, so what it is that you're actually selling and providing as a solution, and they understand your market, but they're a little bit inexperienced with sales, right? Because as long as they understand the offer and your market, you can coach them on, the sales, the scripts, right? Because that's why we tell you guys to take calls and prove your process, prove your system first, because then when you can bring someone else on, you can coach them and easily get them up to speed. It's a little bit harder for them to really understand the offer and the market because there's really no, it just takes a little bit more time. There's no real script that they can just utilize as a process to follow on calls. So that's why we ideally want to have that, right? So again, your audience and your client base, if they can understand them in a deeper level, that's ideally who you want to go for. And there's a lot of agencies out there. Like, for example, I know an agency that targets chiropractors. They only look for either current or former chiropractors to come on their sales team because, of course, they understand them very, very well. And then they just teach them the sales process using their script because it's proven. And it's just a much faster way to ramp them up and get them up to speed. Now, the third scenario is somebody who's experienced with sales, but they have no history with your offer or your market. So again, what this might look like is somebody who is in or has been in door-to-door sales, right? So they understand the sales process and they've been able to close some deals, but it's their first time getting into HT, which is the abbreviation for high ticket, right? So high ticket online sales is definitely different than door-to-door, right? And maybe some of you have experience with door-to-door and the difference, but that's a big one. And last and probably most least desirable is somebody who's inexperienced with sales and they have no history with your offer or market. Now, this is obviously the logical one. If you find someone like this, in most cases, you just want to avoid them. It can work, but it just becomes really difficult, and that learning curve is a lot wider, right? Because they have to learn everything. They have to learn the script and how to sell. They also have to learn your offer and also your marketplace, right? Your industry, what are their pain points? Like, they're just starting from absolute scratch. And again, for the sake of efficiency and just ideal hiring, you kind of want to stay away from those guys, right?
I want to speak. I want to add one thing to that.
Okay,
Is the biggest problem with the fourth scenario is the biggest problem with those kind of people is nothing to do with the industry or the sales itself, right? The biggest headache you'll have is with their mindset.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the biggest thing. You'll notice like one of the, as Christian will go on later, one of the biggest deciding factors will be their mindset as well, because people could be A, B, or C, or D, but maybe their mindset isn't the best place.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a lot of small details, micro details that we look for when we're hiring, and we have a lot of sheets and a lot of documents that we utilize on our interviews. but yes, that's essentially what we're looking for. And there's different ways. Obviously, you're not going to go onto a call and say, "Hey, tell me about your mindset." Like it's something that you it's something that you learn and understand through conversating and talking to them. And if you guys ever have any questions about that, no, I'm not going to bombard Stephanie, but she is amazing at mindset and she understands the mind in depth. We've had some conversations, amazing. But yes, good point, Chris. Now so this is what we're looking for, right? Ideally, we want to look for the alignment triad. So people that align with ideally all three. Again, that's the best, but it is the most rare. But then you want to kind of move for, again, either scenario 2, scenario 3, and then again, scenario D is typically the ones that you kind of want to stay away from.
Christian,
Now,
can I
yes,
say something?
yes.
I just wanted to add that, oh my God, I just lost it. Never mind. I'll be back. I'll be back. No, I'm sorry. I want to add that when you're listening, when you're interviewing someone on the phone or on Zoom or however you're interviewing them, remember the way they sound, right? Because you know how you hate when you call the cable company like, so I just really never have my camera on, usually in my first interview with someone. I just listen to them.
Mm.
Just so that I could hear if it's a turnoff. So that's just one thing I do.
That's a good point. That's a good point. You can feel, this is one of the big things too that we tell constantly our team is you can feel someone's energy on the call, and you can feel the way that they make you feel is the exact same way they're going to make, if they're on a sales team, that's the same way they're going to make your leads feel when they're on the calls. Or if it's an account manager, it's the exact same way they're going to make your clients feel when they're on calls. So you want to listen to that, right? You want to listen to what Stephanie's talking about, how you can hear how somebody sounds, and you're eventually going to feel that, vibe or, the vibration that you get from the call too. So more micro things, but those are really good ones that you want to listen to. Now, more into the step-by-step, this is our hiring process. It does look a little bit longer, but I did space it out. So there's really 9 steps, and it's pretty simple, right? I mean, we're going to start from the very beginning. Is like, you want to obviously go get these. And again, you usually start from the inner circle. So first we'll ask our sales team, we'll ask our setters and our closers, do you guys know anybody who could potentially fit our, our culture? And you guys obviously know our process. They're the best people to ask because they live and breathe the culture, and they're already working within day to day with you. So for them to be able to kind of think about, okay, what does my inner circle look like? They can then point out who might be ideal. And that's typically the most efficient way to go about it. Then the next step, obviously, is you start going out with either ads or posts. So that can be on Facebook, LinkedIn, in general, and then specifically like job boards. You can go and find recruiters. Typically, they will charge you, recruitment fees, obviously, if they find somebody and they place them, and that also varies. You can also run ads. One thing that we'd like to do is run LinkedIn ads. They work really well. There's a lot of different platforms out there that you can try. But it's, we have had our own experiences, like ZipRecruiter, we tried that before. It didn't really necessarily work, but I know there are other agencies who did work for them. It just, for us, it didn't. But we found a lot of success on Facebook, specifically job boards and groups inside of Facebook, as well as LinkedIn. And you can do it organically if you can, or you also ads. Ads has worked really well for us. Okay, so again, you want to go and find obviously the people first. You want to create that demand, and then once you bring them in, what you want to bring them in with is an initial application, right? So an application form is ideal. Obviously, just a set of questions that they can answer for you. Of course, most people will probably send you their resume, and that's okay. But we want them to fill out a form because that shows intention. And then obviously some of those questions can really be ideal for getting a feel for them, just kind of on a surface level screening, right? We don't take it too serious unless we're really looking for like red flags. If we see big red flags, we're probably going to turn them away early on. But for the most part, we're okay with allowing them to kind of come through into the interview process. Okay. Optionally, you can also have them submit a 1-minute video. Sorry. That is kind of what Stephanie was talking about. Is you can then hear them and kind of get a feel for them on again, this is very surface level, but you can still weed out again the red flags of the people that are very easily a no. You can push them out pretty early. And then one thing yeah, go ahead.
Christian, can you just mention a couple of like 1 or 2 red flags for like each one of those initial applications, just so people got a clear idea? So what's a couple of red flags for application form?
Yeah, when we're looking at setters and closers, one of the big things that we want to look for is detail orientation. And we do kind of place certain questions and word them in certain ways that can help us see that. Now, we're not trying to trick anybody, but it's just the way that people answer or type down their answers, right? Same thing like Stephanie said, the way that somebody speaks, right? Or even the way somebody makes them feel on a call. Same thing with the form. You can kind of see just the intention behind it. Do they really care? Do they really want it? So I guess, looking at the way that people answer, the detail orientation in the way that they do. And then obviously like experience. Again, this is like one of the biggest things where you can look for experience and the knowledge in the marketplace and your offer. Like, do they have that right off the bat? And again, if somebody, like when somebody fills out the application and you see somebody is inexperienced in pretty much everything, again, we typically will turn them away pretty quickly.
A kind of red flag I will also about, because I basically hired and built recruitment processes from the ground up as well, right? For a few different like 6, 7+ figure companies, and you'd be surprised by how many people who cannot follow simple instructions. You ask for a 1-minute video, they will shoot you a 1 minute 17, right? And they'd be like, but it's 17 seconds. And I'm like, are you going to tell that to all of your prospects? Right? Or you ask them to film it landscape, they'll do it portrait. Okay. Simple things like that are really good indicators of if they can't follow basic instructions, how are they going to follow all the others? And it's just professionalism.
Being
basically.
late to the interview.
Yeah. Anyway,
Immediate.
Some people might think that's a little bit tedious, but I do like looking for people who are more detail oriented. See, with sales teams, what you have to understand is a lot of times you're gonna struggle naturally with admin stuff, right? So like admin things, like for example, them filling out their stat sheets or giving you updates at the end of the day properly. Our sales team, sometimes they submit them at the next morning. We say we need it by the end of the day, they submit it the next morning. It's like, and it's just something industry wide, especially with high ticket. It is what it is, right? Like, and same thing, like they can only take 5 calls a day because the calls are very in-depth and very like you just have to really be present. I used to take calls and that was my max. I couldn't do any more than 5. Eventually I went down to 4 because I just couldn't show up as well as I wanted to on the 5th call. And then on top of that, you got to do the admin stuff. I'm like, I'm exhausted. Like, I don't want to do it. So
yeah, like as much as we can be strict, right, with the recruitment process, you've also got to learn what kind of leeways can you give and how to handle that journey. Because let's just say if someone is late, right, normally you could give them a leeway, but you have to have established that yourself. And that kind of comes down to what are you willing to tolerate, right? Because for Stephanie, it might be 1 minute. For me, it might be 5 minutes, right? And is there any real difference? No, it kind of just is personal preference with what you've got going on the rest of the day, right? But the assumption is, if someone's say late to a call, is give them the benefit of the doubt, right? I like to go with the rule of innocent until proven guilty, right? Because what if someone says, "Oh, a close relative of mine just died," right? And the last message you sent was going off at them, right? You're going to regret that very quickly, right? And they're going to see you as someone who is not a very empathetic boss, right? Or higher, and they are not going to work with you, right? That's one example.
for sure.
But
Yeah.
yeah, we can talk about that later.
Yeah, no, I like that, innocent until proven guilty. Typically we do the same thing. Because like Chris said, everybody's human. Even it's an unfortunate thing that you might even disqualify somebody from something small that they did in the beginning when maybe, for whatever reason, something played a part into that. It just is what it is, it's just part of life. But you just want to, same thing, you just kind of want to set your own standards, but you do want to set them from the beginning, because the way that you do the interview and the hiring process is what people are going to expect when they join the team. So if it's lazy, if it's half-assed, they're also going to show up lazy and half-assed, and then it's going to translate to when they get hired over as well. So that's why we do want to have some sort of detail orientation within our interview process. So again, you want to create that demand, so people want to apply for the position. You get the initial application. Typically you can look for red flags and then be able to disqualify people. Again, for us, we really just look for like very heavy red flags, like I mentioned before. Then we get into this is the first interview for our sales team, which is a screening interview. You could do this one-on-one. This is typically more that's more industry standard. Like people will do like a one-on-one and do like a high-level screening where it's like 20 to 30 minutes. For us, what we really like, especially for our teams, is group interviews. Because what happens there is you do the same thing. You're asking the same question to everybody, and it's more like a fast-paced interview, which is kind of our company. We move very fast in pretty much every company under our umbrella that we have. So group interviews are very efficient, and typically the ones that you want to hire will naturally stick out, right? They're gonna stand out, and they're gonna be able to perform on the group interview, ideally. And not everybody does, which is why we have a second interview, which we'll get to that in just a second. But typically, this first one, you want to do 20 to 30 minutes just to see if they meet, our initial qualifications. And we have, again, documents that kind of outline these in more specific. I don't know why I put this here because I didn't put the document, but I can add some examples here right after we get off. But, essentially, we're looking for somebody, especially with sales teams, somebody who can speak, who holds conversation, someone who can like really stand out as far as like making us like people feel the energy, right? And again, that's a big thing that we get out of group interviews. If somebody's really quiet, especially with the sales team, if they're really quiet in the group interview, they most likely won't work out. Yeah, yes, some people are shy on their initial like first impressions, but you also have to think about like every call that you take as a salesperson is going to be your first impression. Like it's all going to be the same thing because every prospect is new. So that's why we do the group interviews, because ideally the people who are very good at conversating, they're very social, they're very more so outgoing. That's who we're looking for, right? Because it's hard to get somebody out of the shell, but it's a little bit easier to tame somebody. Tame somebody's like if they're really like outgoing and they're really like they like to take over the call. It's a little bit easier to get them to tone down versus really trying to get somebody out of their shell. It's really difficult. So that is what our initial interview looks like, is a group interview. But again, you could do a one-on-one screening, but we like to go for efficiency and effectiveness in our process. For those that we like and that stick out, and again, it's not just going to be the people that talk the most. It's also depends on what they say, how they say it. So very similar to what Stephanie said, how they're speaking, and also just the energy that they give off is going to, bring them onto the second interview. And that's going to be what's called a mock triage call. So this is where we have, we give them, the first thing that we do is we give them a training. So we say, here is what typically we do on our, most of the time it's like a very quick 5-minute setting call. We provide them the training. We give them a breakdown of a call. So we'll send a recording of, like, for example, Zarar going over a call that he listened to, and then he's breaking down a bunch of stuff. And then finally, we provide them a script of that flow of the call, okay, which is outlined right here, these 3 steps. So the reason we do this is because we want to be able to test their skill set, right? And again, this is very similar for both setters and closers. We're testing their skill set. It's also very efficient because they don't have to, they're only implementing the training that we sent them and the script that we sent them, which is, typically a 5-minute call. And what we're really looking for is, are they moldable? Because not everybody's going to have a perfect call. Most people don't, 9 times out of 10. But what we're looking for is, like, we want to find 6s and 7s, right? If you rate them out of 10, 6 and 7, and turn them into 10s. Ideally, that's what we're looking for. And what we're going to disqualify is somebody who comes off as more like a 3 and a 4, because obviously the jump of a 3 to 4 versus a 6 and a 7 is a big one. And the way you're able to do this, because sometimes, what we're talking about is disqualifying quite a few people, but the way that we can disqualify quite a few people is because we have such a high demand. We have a lot of people that come through our application process and that want to apply with us. So we're able to have the group interviews, and we're able to say no, and we're able to look for the 6s and 7s. In the beginning, we were looking at 3s and 4s, but eventually you start, you get this, you get a pipeline going essentially, and then you can kind of swift through people a lot easier, if that makes sense. It takes a little bit of time. And again, this process here is a little bit more efficient. Instead of them having to learn about your offer, your pitch, and specifically for your company, you just give them something that they may already kind of be used to. And it's just like really simple, like, here's 3-minute call. We just want you to set us in a mock example. Just need that, right? That's very simple. And then we do that. If they do well, we move them forward. If they do exceptionally well, we've only done this once. If they do exceptionally well, we'll move into what's called the scorecard interview, which is what I'll talk about in just a second, which is basically where we give them the offer. But if they do well and we kind of want to consider them, then we will just end the interview there, right? And then we'll save the scorecard interview for the next one, because then we'll just pool everybody else. But if they're really good, we'll just do it right then and there. We'll just like, okay, perfect. Let's move into the next step.
Oh, I have a question. Like, how many clients would you recommend we have before we start hiring employees?
That's a good question. So this isn't yeah, that one can get a little bit deep. So I would not recommend hiring employees. So the way I see it is W-2 versus contractors. I would typically always go with contractors.
Okay.
I think simpler for your business. But for a salesperson, it really depends. Like if you, again, we always recommend that you take your own calls first. get to know the process, get to know the system, like we talked about earlier. So that way, when you bring somebody in, you can mainly look for the understanding of your market and your offer, and then you can train them on sales. So typically, like, there's really no hard set and fast rule. It's really when you feel comfortable with the process, with at least like 5 to 10 calls, at least, that you feel comfortable, then you would look for a closer because they're commission only, right? So
Yeah.
it's usually an easier, simpler hire. When you look at like account managers who are more on like a monthly payment, more of like a salary base, that's where it kind of changes, and you should wait just a little bit longer.
I was kind of thinking of that scenario yesterday when I was thinking of stuff. I was thinking like because I know that the closers are commission based, so you never have to worry about their pay because their pay is based off the production. But
Yeah.
when I was thinking of like I was thinking, is it a good idea to have like a setter be an account manager, like a dual setter and account manager? Because the way I was thinking about it was I could hire account managers based off of how many clients I have. Like if I have a big pool of clients, I don't have to worry about their pay because their pay would be a percentage of like whatever I'm getting from the actual clients. Like if the clients are paying me a retainer, I can employ a certain amount of account managers and also make them setters as well, like dual position, and pay and give them pay based off of the amount of clientele I have. And then the closers, I won't have to worry about them because they're all commission, so I don't have to worry about their money, and I could afford to pay the account managers based off of how many clients I personally have.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting model. The only reason I would say I wouldn't personally like it, I mean, you can test it, but I personally wouldn't like it because ideally you want your setter to be full-time, just setting calls for the closer, ideally, right?
Oh, and that's it, and not being account manager, right?
Ideally, yeah, because I mean, you got to think about it, right? The setter's ideal, like what they should be focusing on, much like we talk about like with you guys as a CEO, what should you be focusing on? So setter should be setting calls. That is the highest leverage for your business, right? When you think about it, if they can, the more calls they can set, the more closes ideally your closer should be able to make, which
Oh, okay.
ultimately means the more clients you can have, which ultimately means the more you can afford an account manager. So that's the way I see it. It's
Oh, that makes sense. That makes sense. I like that. That the
Yeah.
train of thought makes sense.
Also, as things progress, is you might not notice it now, but there's quite a few differences between the setter and the account manager that don't mesh well,
Oh,
right?
okay.
That do take time to learn and be able to use
yeah, yeah. That's also another
as
good.
well.
The setters have to kind of master their craft, because that's the way we teach our team, is to be very detail oriented and master their craft of what they're currently doing. Because as long as everybody does their part, you're going to win. Like the company is going to win, right? The setters are setting calls, the closers are closing them, and the account managers are managing clients properly. You're going to have a growing company. So that's why we have everybody focus on their own. But I do see like where your thought process comes from with a setter kind of being versatile. But again, their highest leverage for you specifically in your company is for them to set calls, so then the closer can have a booked calendar, because then they're more likely to close, which then means that you will have reoccurring money coming in. So you don't have to worry about, because I can see where your mind's at. It's more like worried about like, where the money's coming from. But again, if you have that very efficient sales process, you won't have to worry about where's the money coming from, because you're going to have money coming in steadily.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense? Any follow-up questions?
Yeah, that makes sense. That kind of clears things up again because I wasn't sure if it was advisable to have like dual position people, but
Yeah.
that makes sense because I know I'm so I work for a tech company and some of us are dual positions. Like I do QA, like I'm a software tester, and I do support. But they kind of transfer me over to be more of a mentor. So I kind of mentor the support staff, and then I also do testing for the software engineers.
Mhm.
So I kind of have a dual position, but it's kind of like one is the major and one is a minor position.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And I can see, like I said, I can see where you came from with that. But again, the way that setters communicate with leads versus how an account managers communicate with clients is also a little bit different.
Okay.
Yeah, like I said, the biggest thing that I look for is the highest leverage. Like what is the highest leverage activity that a setter could be doing versus a closer and versus an account manager, and
You
that's what.
you have infinite more experience than me, so I will take your advice. I'll take your advice. I was just curious if that would be a good idea, but I'll take your advice since you think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I got you. Okay, sounds good. That's a good question though. I like the way your mind's working. All right, so we have interview number one. Again, a group interview. If we have them move forward, we go into a mock, which again we give them a training. We say it's like a 3 to 5 minute call. You're just going to set me for the closer. Very simple, very quick, and that way we can see basically, are they moldable, right? One of the biggest things that you want to find, especially within a closer, is are they coachable? Are they moldable? Because if you come across with a guy who just walks around with his chin up and he doesn't listen to anybody, you're going to have problems in the future. They're not going to listen to any sort of coaching that you give them on your offer, which who knows your offer better than anyone is going to be you. So if you can coach them on your offer, but they're not listening, you're going to have some trouble there. So make sure you look out for that. And that is also one of the red flags that we look for inside of the interviews, is somebody who comes in with a really big ego and a strong ego, somebody who like stands on their 10 toes and they don't move at all. You know, although it might seem very confident, you got to be careful with that, especially with the closer, because again, typically they're not moldable or coachable. All right. So after we have the one-on-one and we have that mock call, if we still like them, like I said, if they are an A+, like 10 out of 10, we're going to give them the offer then and there. Otherwise, we put them in a pool, and then from there we decide who do we actually want to hire, and then we go into what's called the scorecard interview, which is where we go over expectations of the position. So here's what we expect out of you as a setter or you as a closer. Here's what your day-to-day will look like. Here is what you can expect from us as a management team or as a company. And finally, here's the offer, right? Commission structure. And ideally, you want to have some numbers already written out. So like, if we're giving you this many calls, ideally, you should see about this many live calls. You should be able to close this many, which means you'll make this much in a month, right?
Oh, I have another question that I'm
Sure.
thinking about, since we're talking about closers. My question is, if we hire a closer, right, and obviously they're working off a commission, would it be advisable, like, let's just say they have a client and the client is on, like, let's say a 1-year retainer.
Mhm.
Should I offer them like a percentage of every client they bring on, like ongoing until they leave? Like, say they get me a client and the client signs up for a year and they're continuously paying money. Should I give them like a little cut percentage of what they're bringing into me for closing it because they brought the client in, and then they'll have like steady income even if they're not continuously closing, because that'll help me retain them. If they're good and they go through a little slump, they'll be motivated because they're still getting some money, because as long as their client they bought in is coming in, they get like a little, almost like a royalty kind of.
Yeah, there's really no wrong or right way to do this. It just on preference. My preference is we typically give closers commissions up until about 3 to 6 months. I mean, if
Mhm,
somebody's on a 12-month agreement, maybe we'll push it to 6 months. But at that
mhm.
point, it really becomes your client success team, right? At that point, it's no longer the closer. Like, yes, you want to incentivize the closer. That's why we give them the full like first 3 months. Anything after
Okay.
that, if the client stays, it's because your account manager is doing a great job, not because the close.
Okay, I got you. So you would recommend like about 3 months that we give them kickback a little bit.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that way we can ensure, because if you just give them 1 month, the closer is going to bring on anybody they can. They're going to be like, F it. If you've got money, like just pay us, and that way I make my commission. But if they're
Yeah.
making money on 3 months, they can be a little bit more relaxed. It's like, okay, you're going to make money for the 3 months. Let's make sure we bring on the right clients so you can make more, right? They're more incentivized.
Gotcha.
But
Gotcha. Makes
again, if somebody signs on for a 12-month agreement and they stay with you past 6 months, typically it means the account manager is doing a great job, and that's who you should incentivize at that point.
Gotcha. Gotcha. Makes
For
sense.
yeah. But again, some people, I know that there are agencies out there who will give commissions. I mean, it does decrease, but there's commissions for 12 months. But again, it's really more preference. Like I said, I would much rather incentivize the account managers at that point. If they can retain somebody longer than 6 months, then maybe I'll give them like a revenue share of like, if they stay at past 6 months, I'll give you, you can make a little bit more money.
Gotcha. Sounds good.
That's also a good question. But yeah, so scorecard interview, very simple. It's how we get into the, again, expectations and also what they expect to get paid. And then from there, obviously, most likely they're going to accept it unless they have other offers. And typically you kind of fall into this follow-up, which you don't want to. Very similar to how you guys structure your offers for your clients. You want to kind of put together, an incentivizing offer for your closers and the way that you position it, right? Just making sure that they understand that they know the details of what it is that you do, how much you understand your industry, and that way they're confident they're going into a company that has done the research, has a good offer, pick the right niche, right? Things like that. It has a proven process too. So that's one thing. So typically what you'll expect as far as commissions, because I've gotten this question, the industry in general, high ticket, doesn't matter like if you're an agency or if you're a coach or whatever, you're going to expect between 10 and 20% in commissions. Now for agencies specifically, what you're typically looking to offer is about 15%, right? Because it really just depends. Obviously, the higher the price point, the smaller the commission, right? Because obviously somebody who's selling private jets, they're not going to make 15% on their sale. They're going to make less than 10. Typically less than 5, might even be 2%, because it's just such a big sale that if they do make it, they're going to get a pretty big check. Obviously, if you're selling like $1,000 product, you're going to have to offer more commission to incentivize a good closer to stay. Yes, that's what we're looking at. And again, pretty simple here. Just, you know, at that point we get them hired. Onboarding is pretty simple. You can get into the training, and then ramp up in training. And I'm not going to give too much details here, as you can see, because this is very in depth and we're not there yet. But for those of you, if you ever do bring on a closer, let us know and we can go through, you know, more. We can probably even schedule a one-on-one call and go through that in more detail of how to onboard, how to ramp up, because typically we do a 60-day trial period. Where obviously the payment and everything's the same, but we just want to make sure that they're a good fit, and vice versa. One thing that we tell our team, which Chris might remember, is like, I obviously want to make sure that you're the right fit for us, but vice versa, I want you to make sure that you're in the right place for you. Otherwise, you're going to hate it here, and I'm going to be able to feel it. Every day is going to be a dread working together, and we want to make sure that it goes both ways, that we're both happy. And then performance optimization, of course, within those 60 days, we want to make sure that they're hitting KPIs, which is what we tell a lot of you, like when we bring on a closer, we want to make sure we get them up to KPI. If they're not hitting the numbers within 60 days, typically we're going to most likely move on from them. All right. So that is what we look for and how we hire, again, the sales team, whether it be setters or closers. Any final questions before we move on to the account managers?
Okay, you have the.
I think we're good. All right. So account managers, it's a little bit different, right? Because again, sales team is ideally who's going to be getting the revenue, making the money. Account managers are the ones who retain, right? Keep the clients, communicate. Now, as a reminder, I spoke about this a while ago, and if you guys want to, you can look it up inside of the replay vault. But essentially, there's two models for managing clients, right? And there's one with an account manager, obviously, very simple, and there's one without an account manager. And they both have pros and cons. They're different agencies with different models. Again, it's really down to preference. For us, we've always gone here with option number one, which is with an account manager, because you can control communication, you can control the speed and efficiency that the team moves, and it allows the team to focus on what they're supposed to be focusing on. Again, like we just talked about, like what is the high leverage activity for that specific department or that specific person, and then also better upsell opportunities. Right now, without an account manager, it's pretty much the opposite of all four of those, right? Inconsistent communication, because the team has to communicate and they have to do their work, right? But they're probably going to try and lean towards doing their work, because if they don't provide results, then obviously it's going to tank. But at the same time, if they don't communicate, the client's going to get pissed anyways. So that is the main reason why we have an account manager. And then we're unable to set proper expectations, right? Again, because the team is probably not going to focus on communication. They don't know, like they're not going to have certain triggers of like, when do I tell this client something? You know, we've had, we tried this model with, I think, like 2 clients, and then I absolutely hated it. So I moved away from it. But so with those 2 clients, the contractor was doing really well. They were getting like a 3 to 4x return on ad spend, but they never communicated it to the client. And so the client was just kind of in the dark. Now, they weren't necessarily unhappy, because of course they can see the sales coming in, but they just, the expectation of how good we were doing was never properly communicated, which is something that you want to do. If you're doing well for your clients, you want to tell them and you want to showboat a little bit, because again, clients, the reason they hired you to do their marketing is because they don't understand marketing. If they did, they would be doing it themselves. So that's where you have to come in. You have to set the proper expectations of not just timelines and expectation deliverables, but also of results when it's going well. And even when it's not doing so hot, like when you're in a testing phase, you still want to communicate to clients and let them know, like, this is a testing phase. Here's what we've learned so far. Here's why we think certain things are happening. And here's the next steps. But if a team is doing both the work and communicating, they're not going to be able to go that far and in depth. And the client in general is probably going to churn because of that. Right.
I think I've got a good oversimplified analogy for this. Is let's say you've got a basketball, baseball, or football team. Okay. And it doesn't matter if it's American or British football. Okay. It's like the client would be the owner, the business owner. Okay. The contractors, right, would be your players, right? And the account manager would essentially be your manager, right? Imagine as the business owner, wondering what on earth is going on with your football team, right? When all the players are trying to perform and they don't know how to send or communicate with the actual business owners themselves. It's kind of like that. Grossly oversimplified though, but
That's a good
Yeah,
one.
that's how I kind of liken it to.
Yeah, for sure.
You
Again,
can imagine how mayhem that is.
yeah, definitely. And again, when you think about that from your contractor perspective too, is like they, especially if they know what they're doing, they're going to have a vast knowledge of marketing. We kind of talked about that the last time I hosted the mastermind meeting, was like the different platforms and all the cool stuff that you can do. And so the contractor is trying to implement that stuff, but if they're having to communicate, their mind is like half there, half not. So, and typically, you know, they're not the best closers either, you know, especially your technical team, your technical media buyers, your developers. Those guys have really great logical brains for the work that they do, but they're not typically the best communicators, let alone closers. So for them to upsell your clients, because that is ideally how you want, you want to retain money. So money continues to come in reoccurring. So you're not always just focused on making new money. You want to be able to have your back-end team be able to upsell or, you know, be able to extend clients, right, and retain them. So if you have an account manager, ideally that's somebody who, you know, typically has better communication and should be as more likely to be able to do that, right? So again, yeah, go ahead.
I do have one thing, and you're gonna laugh at this, Christian. Is another reason is there's a huge difference between trying to fulfill duties as a contractor, right, or do some kind of marketing, right? There's a difference between trying to do that and manage someone, right? Because you've got say the marketing, let's just say copywriting as an example. You've got the copywriting mindset, which is hugely creative. And then you've got the management side, right, which is more ops focus, right? For a large amount of people here, you would not have tried to switch between that on a daily basis multiple times a day. I can tell from personal experience, right, because I've got a vast amount of experience with both, and so is Christian. That is extremely difficult, okay? You never want to have someone doing that ideally. Switching constantly from creative tasks to ops and back and forth is just not a smart idea. You will burn out insanely fast.
Very fast, yes. Yeah, that's a really good point. I don't know if any of you have tried to, you know, whether it be set up Go High Level or, you know, to create an account on Go High Level and then compare that to having a conversation with somebody over coffee. Two completely different mind states, right? You're doing two completely different things. One is ops and then one is more creative, right? Right side and left side of the brain. And if you keep switching through it, your brain's gonna get fried. So that's really the simplest way to put it. And you know, as always, whenever you or obviously your client, they buy a service, you're going to get the service delivered, but inevitably you're going to have questions, right? And so that's for the whole point of having this model of ideally what we think is having an account manager. So that way they're there to communicate with your clients and give them that clarity. Because again, you could go without an account manager, just have your media buyers or your contractors communicate if they're willing to. But again, you lose out on a lot of potential really good ways to retain clients and keep them happy. Referrals, right? There's so many benefits. So that's why we decided to go with option number one, right? Now, when we get into more of the details of what we're actually looking for in account managers, we're looking for specialized knowledge, right? Skill set that can only come from basically experience. This is basically experience. So what we're looking for there, we're looking for a track record. Have they done this before? Have they been an account manager, right? Do they understand the process and the system of being in that position? The second thing is also industry acumen. So do they understand who you're working with and the client, right? Are they able to speak industry language? So like I said, there are agencies out there who like specifically hire people who are either current or former working in the position that they're hiring for. The industry they're hiring for. So that, you know, if you work with contractors, you could look for if you work with chiropractors, you could look for previous chiropractors who obviously they're the best ones to know what the practice is like, what the industry is like, and they can speak the jargon of the industry. So industry acumen is number two. Number three is buy-in and communication. And this is really just like that passion. Do they feel excited? Does it seem like they're excited about obviously the culture and the values of your agency, the product itself, and then also finally the market, right? And you know, if somebody just completely, I'm just trying to think of an example. If someone just does not agree with who you're working with or whatever it may be, right? You obviously don't want to hire them. Like there's not many, but there's some agencies out there who do work with solely like CBD products or you know, which is marijuana or anything like that. They all kind of fall under that. So if you are an agency that works with those types of clients, and then you have an account manager who is not happy with that, or they don't agree with it, obviously you're not going to hire them, right? So these are the three things that we look for in our account managers: making sure that they understand the position, making sure that they understand the industry, and then also they have that buy-in and the communication of the culture, the product, and the market, right? And typically, the way that we see it is industry acumen and buy-in are the more important ones, because you can always teach somebody the position, very similar to like a closer. You can give them the process, you can give them the script, but it's very difficult. It's a little bit more difficult to teach and coach somebody on, understanding the industry and then being obviously bought in. You can't change the way somebody, thinks. And so, mind you, as we get into the hiring process, that's basically the last step here that we're going to go over, is the hiring process of an account manager. It's a pretty long one. And Chris will know this from experience with us specifically. It's a long process because of the cost of change, right? Because with a closer, yes, they're going to be, we want them with you for the long term in the long run. But, if they were to leave, you can plug another closer in and they can take those same calls. With an account manager or, your client success team, if they leave, you've got to change all of your clients and all your accounts, right? And typically when a CSM leaves, there's usually a high churn rate, right? So that's something that you have to be mindful of when you're hiring. Is you want to make sure you find somebody who's like really going to stick it out through the long run. But again, you also don't want to go too long, because then you're gonna really tire out maybe a good applicant who's just like, this process is way too long, I am out of here, So this is the way that we've kind of found somewhat of a sweet spot. It might be a little bit long too. So we've got 12 steps, yes. So very similar to the closing process, we start with an ad or a post. Like I said before, typically we start within our own circle. So for example, I will ask Chris or I will ask Kyle, like, do you guys know anybody else within your circles who might be a good fit? And of course, who better to know like the culture and our processes than them? So they can easily pick out somebody based on, what they already understand. And then from there, we just work our way outwards. So we'll go on to Facebook, LinkedIn, job boards, recruiters, or run ads, etc. If you guys want some examples too of maybe some Facebook groups or job boards, let us know. And we can give you some recommendations on where to look. Again, it's just very similar to the closers. We start with an initial application. Now, with our account managers and our client success team, we have our application form, which is very simple. We require, so with sales teams, it's optional, but we require a 1-minute video. And I don't really do this anymore, which is personality profiling, which is where you ask or send somebody a link and they take a personality test. I find that it's not always the most accurate, but this 1-minute video for me really does it, especially
Did
with
Kyle have to do that?
He did, yeah. Kyle did do that. He said,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. I remember doing mine. I was like, oh, that's perfect.
But the 1-minute video tells me specifically and will tell you a lot. Again, very, very similar. If you guys were here when Stephanie mentioned the way somebody talks and the energy, this is really important too. Because when you're looking for an account manager, you really want to look for somebody who can communicate and hold a conversation. And I'll even go through some examples of some of the questions I ask on my interviews, because they're not very industry standard. But again, the biggest thing you want to find is somebody who can communicate and hold a conversation well. Step number 3 is the video assessment. Oh, yes. So that's where the 1-minute video comes in. I will look at their application first. And if I like the application, then I'll watch the video, make sure that the video, again, gives me the energy and gives me like the ideal somebody who I want to be client facing with our agency or companies. And then I'll move them into interview number 1, very similar to our sales team. We'll do group interviews, but again, you could do like a screening interview, which is one-on-one, which is what most companies do. But we like the group interview again, because the really good applicants will stand out, right? The people who have the energy, who are very bright, bubbly type of thing. That's what you're really looking for. And typically it's a 20-30-minute call, very similar, again, to the closing call. And again, you're looking for basically red flags. Anybody who's really shy, really quiet, sometimes we do give them the benefit of the doubt, but if they're really shy and quiet, we'll typically disqualify them because
there's also one good thing. I know you haven't mentioned yet, Christian, but in those calls, right, is actually, do you want to give a recommendation of typically how many people do you want to limit to those group interviews? Because obviously you don't want to have like forever. You want to give everyone enough time to shine, basically. I think it's like what, 5 or 6 max, right?
Yeah, I think the max that we've ever done was 8, and that was pretty. It was a little bit tough. You have to move a little bit more, a little faster and more efficient.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the sweet spot would be like 5 or 6 people at a time, and you can schedule multiple group interviews because either way, it's more efficient, right? Instead of scheduling 5 or 6 different calls, you have one. But yes, 5 or 6
also
sweet spot.
Yeah, during that time is one thing you want to catch is someone mumbling, right? Are they what's the word for it? It's not just mumbling, it is they're almost like, yeah, I'm just going to say mumbling. They're saying far more than they need to, right? Because for whatever reason, they haven't prepped the answer beforehand, right? Or because you can't prep for every single answer like word for word, it's just not going to be possible. So ideally, when they attend the interview, they should have two types of answers. They should have ones that are most common, right? For example, a question might be, actually, one of my favorite questions is how do you handle stress? Right? I remember smiling so much listening to how everyone else handled that. So yeah, you've got those kind of obvious questions, but then you've got to have like, how do you answer questions that you have not prepared for word by word? During those moments, those you should have the applicants should have some kind of framework of how they would handle that, right?
Isn't wouldn't mumbling kind of also be like a sign of unconfidence? Like if you're mumbling or you're unsure of yourself, like when you go up to
It's
somebody, if you're confident, you'll speak clearly. But if you're kind of unconfident in your answers, you might mumble, like talk really
oh,
low and not really sound loud because
it's not
you're
just
unconfident.
yeah, it's not just mumbling. I was trying to find the other word. Waffling. That is it, right?
Okay.
And Christian mentioned that it's ideally he would rather work with someone who's a bit more like speaks a bit more, is a lot more confident and like what's the word for it? Is
Animated. They're more animated.
extroverted, I would say, right? Easier to establish conversations and so on. But they also need to know when to stop talking and be mindful of other people's time as well, right? And that's a very important skill as an account manager. But yeah, you just want to those calls, right? Is you want to see, are people giving concise answers? Are they giving them confidently? And are they mindful of other people's time as well?
Yeah, I think one thing that we typically do on our interviews is obviously we preface at the beginning of each one of like what we frame the call, right? What is this call going to be? How are we going to do it? And so one of the things that we say is we set the expectations right off the bat. It's like obviously there's a group interview and there's quite a few of you. So we want to be mindful of everybody's time. And when I ask you a question, I don't want to hear your life story. I want to get the answer to the question so we can move on. And one thing that is really easy for me to kind of put in the back of my head as a potential disqualifier is if somebody tells me their life story and they don't do what I asked. And one thing that really stood out, this is a case study for Chris, is on his interview call, he was the only one who was precise with his answers as I asked, right? I mean, obviously, if I didn't say that, then it's fine. But if I specifically said, like, we want to be mindful, like, and then sometimes even the questions, like, for example, I also would ask, what stresses you out the most? I specifically say, without an explanation, tell me what stresses you out the most. Chris was the only one that just told me the answer. And then I asked him for the follow-up. I was like, okay, tell me why. But everybody,
should I share what my answer was?
oh, wow, yeah. What was your answer?
Yeah, so actually, let's do a quick exercise, right? Is imagine if you were in a hiring position, right? Whatever position you want, I want you to just think for the next 15 seconds, how would you answer that? Okay, just answer that in your head, okay? And we're gonna start now, okay? And I'll say when 15 seconds is up. Okay, so 15 seconds is up. Okay. Now I want you to hold that answer in your head. Okay. And then I want you to listen to my response. Okay. So Christian, I remember in maths, I think it was either yours or asking like, how do you handle stress? And I said, I handle stress pretty much fine. Pretty well. That's all I do. Okay. Now, I couldn't wait for them to ask that question simply because I heard a lot of other responses for how people handle stress, right? And there are many ways to handle it. But again, I understood the point of that interview is to catch out red flags. Okay. And during those moments, you want to demonstrate you can handle stress rather than actually talk about, hey, I can handle all these different types of stress. Because again, think about what you as the interviewer are looking for, and what the interviewee, right, should be demonstrating as well is mindfulness of time as well, right? In those cases, just showing is a lot more efficient in that case, right? If they really want to know about how you handle stress, right, they will ask you again in a one-on-one call where things get a little bit more personal, right? I can tell you right now, most people will never think of it like that way, right? So yeah, did that help everyone? I also find it quite a bit funny because it was only like a couple of words.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
that was kind of helpful. I didn't expect the answer to be so simplistic. That's a very simplistic response. I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit more complex.
No,
Yeah,
just
that's
keep
the
it
thing,
simple.
right? Most people will be complex with it, and that's the thing is I ask specifically, like, just give me the answer. I don't need an explanation unless I ask for it. And again, that's just detail orientation. Like if somebody can hear that and actually understand it and then give me what I asked for, because obviously the follow up to Chris was like, "What do you mean by that?" Like we went into the detail, and then we talked a little bit more about that in the one-on-one. So he was correct in his thing. But again, like interview number one is that group interview, and we want to look for like detail orientation, and we're looking for people who can really stand out and communicate really, really well, because that's ideally who we want to be our account manager, because all they're going to do is communicate, right? If it's not communication to the client or the contractor, it's going to be communication with you. Like that's pretty much all they do day in, day out. So keep in mind the position that you're hiring for and what they're going to be doing, and look for that on the calls, right? Now, if somebody stands out on the interview, the group interview, we then schedule one-on-ones, as Chris mentioned. This is where we dive a little bit deeper into more specific questions to understand the individual versus their personality, because we get a pretty good idea of who the personality is on the group interview. So this is more getting to know the person and their character, right? And I'll throw this question out typically on group interviews, but sometimes I do it on one-on-ones. It's, if you could have any superpower, what would it be and why? And usually that's not a question that you'll typically get at an interview. I've been doing that for the past like 6 years as I've been doing interviews. It always catches people off guard. If somebody says, "I don't see what this has to do with the position or the interview," they're automatically disqualified. Because I just want to see if somebody has the creativity and they're able to just kind of step out. Because again, what you're going to get, especially from an account manager position, you're going to get clients throwing a whole bunch of different things at you. So you have to be ready and be able to expect the unexpected. And again, it is just kind of a playful way to see if somebody like fits the culture, because that's kind of our culture. We're very laid back, as you can see. Like I'm not in a suit and a tie. I'm not very corporate. I'm very calm. And even same thing with our interviews are typically a little more. I mean, they're casual more so. So if that's the culture that we have, that again is what I want to set from the beginning, and that's what I want to interview for. So again, everything that you're looking for, set that into the interview in some way, shape, or form. So one-on-ones is typically a little bit more about character and being able to see who the actual person is and getting to know their experience firsthand, right? And then what I'll do typically after the second interview, if I still think they're a good fit, I will send them some homework. And that homework is really just a Google document with, I think it's like, I give them a scenario of a client, and I ask them 3 questions of how they would answer or kind of manage the situation, right? The first one is like the client's super happy. The second one is the client's, kind of in between. And the third one is like the client's like, "I want to leave." I'm like, that's it. And so we kind of see in how they would think about answering and going through those scenarios. What I'm really looking for is somebody who understands, has the EQ, right? There's IQ, which is intelligence, and there's EQ, which is more of emotional, right? And so at that point, what I'm looking for is emotional when I send this homework, because if somebody just goes straight for, if somebody says, for example, one of the scenarios that we sometimes rotate in there is, my husband, unfortunately, he's ill and I can't really focus on what we're doing right now. Is there anything that we can do, right? And what I really don't want is somebody to just like straight answer the question of like, just give it a straight answer, right? What I'm looking for is somebody who says, shows that emotional and compassion, says, "I understand, it's unfortunate. Can we get on a call and talk about it?" That's really what I'm looking for. And to be honest with you, I think Chris in his group was the only one that even offered to do calls on all 3, which is again what I'm looking for. So
Really?
yeah, because
Okay.
some people did like 1 or for 2 of them, but you did for all 3, which is again what I'm looking for. Because at the end of the day, what an account manager is there for is for communication, right? It's a relationship builder, somebody who should ideally have EQ. So that's what I'm looking for, somebody who is open to having that call for every single scenario. So that is my like biggest, I guess you could say, like green flag. That's what I really want. That's what's going to make me like put a star next to your type of thing.
One thing I do want to state that even though that is something that Christian was looking for, right? Ideally, with an account manager, you do not want them hopping on a call for every single scenario. Okay. Um, One, mostly from a business side, that is not a very good idea because it sets the wrong expectations, right? And it's not very scalable. Okay. One of the things you guys will realize as you become more of the CEOs that you need to be from the business, right, is what should you be doing to scale, right? And you're going to look back to maybe the first couple of weeks or some of the ideas you had, right, about how a business should be run or how communication should be run between team members. And for better term of a word, right, you will cringe, okay? Because you will realize just how little you knew. But you can also take comfort from that. The fact that you can see and acknowledge that just shows how far you've come as a CEO since then, right? Because most people, even those with a bit of experience, is running a successful digital marketing agency isn't the same as running other companies, right? Everyone has their own nuances, and you're going to learn that along the way.
Yeah, definitely a good point. I know we're a little bit over time. I'm okay with staying a little bit longer. So I'll just go ahead and wrap up actually here in a couple minutes because I do have a call I'm late for. I just realized. So yeah, I sent over the homework, and again, I'm looking for that EQ. Everybody has their own preferences, but again, that's what I was looking for. That's good context that Chris just said. You don't want them hopping on every call or for every little thing. But for me, I just want to make sure that somebody has the EQ and the understanding that a conversation is a lot better had over the phone versus in Slack. Same thing for your account managers. You don't want them handling situations over the phone. Over text. You want them to go onto the phone and have a conversation. That's typically the best way to do it. So typically what I would then do is after I send the homework and it comes back and I approve them, then I will have them go on a one-on-one interview with another person on the team. So as you can see, this is an even more added step that we have with our CSMs or with our client success team and our account managers. We want them to speak with anyone. So for example, if I have somebody joining our client success team, I'll have them speak to somebody in the operations department. Or if we have a closer, well, if we have we just do this for the client success team. We don't do it for sales. So it's, whoever it is that's coming in, I'll have them speak to somebody in the operations team. I'll have them speak to somebody in the closing team. I might have them go speak to Zarar if he has got the time, or Mo, right? I just want them to speak to somebody else. And what this is, it's an interview disguised as a one-on-one conversation. The way I preset it is you can speak with one of our team members to get to know what our culture is like. But in reality, the individual also has like a structure for the call, and they're also kind of reading into the person too, to make sure that they'd be a good fit, vice versa. So it's kind of a two bird, one stone thing. And then afterwards, what I do is very similar to the closers. We have a scorecard interview. So the first thing I'll do is I'll go over the homework. I'll ask mainly just why, like why they feel about the document, answer the questions the way they did. And then I go into the more, if they sound good and everything up to this point, you could imagine, right? Somebody gets to this point, like, aren't they like for sure going to get in? Even here, like they're still getting screened of like how they answer the questions and how they communicate with me. And if I like them, then I'll get into the scorecard, which is going over, what you can expect as far as like pay, what is the salary, or what is the pay structure like, expectations, right? And then obviously typically they'll accept. So then we get into hiring, onboarding, very similar to the sales team, right? Ramp up, and then performance, making sure they get the KPI within, roughly about 60 days. So that is the account manager process of hiring. I know I kind of sped through the last few kind of steps there, but any questions before we hop off?
It's not really a question, it's more of a statement that I do like this clinic because I am not one, I'm the last one that you would hire. I have never done sales. The market that we're in, yes, my background is healthcare, but it's not the niche in particular that we're picking.
Right.
But my husband, I'm glad we're a tag team here because he has done sales. He has done door-to-door sales. He has done phone sales, all of that. He has a funny thing of saying how he would sell things, but we're not going to talk about that. We're going to keep this private. But it's just, he has a way with words, and I'm one that I'm task driven. So it's like, okay, you're all adults. You don't want it? Fine. Boom. Not going to sell it. But he's got that knack. And there's certain people that just, they can do it. You got to find it.
For sure. No, I completely agree. Sorry, Chris, what page did you want me to go up to? Is it this one?
Yeah, actually, no, scroll up. I think it's the next one up. Yeah, so the thing about the 2 weeks minimum before taking accounts, okay? So just to clarify here, right, is 2 weeks minimum in itself is okay, I think for launch manager agency, it might be a bit different because what we're doing is kind of different from what you guys are trying to do, right? The businesses are different, okay? Generally 2 weeks is, yeah, I think generally 2 weeks is okay, right? But in terms of taking accounts, before giving your account manager taking accounts, okay, is you don't have to give them every account, okay? You can drip feed them the accounts, right, as the test, right? That kind of also protects you because let's say even if they pass all the checks, right, but there's maybe something that you missed, right, and that element that you don't want gets communicated to all your clients. You don't want that, okay? But at the beginning, you don't really have to worry too much about that, right? Because I imagine that let's just say that you are the account manager, because obviously we recommend you be the account manager for the first couple of clients, right? Let's say you bring on an account manager after you're managing like 5 or 10 clients, right? You'll probably be handing most of them off anyway, right? But again, I know we're just rushing towards the end here because Christian's got a hard start, but if you've got any more questions about this, just ask this in the marketing channel.
Yes.
Yeah, like just tag us in the marketing channel. I would say specifically, you can tag Christian or any one of your accountability coaches, right? Me or Kyle as well, because this is basically our role as well. We've gone through the process as well. I've gone through both sides. I've gone through hiring and being hired and so on, from sales, copy, like all couple of different things and built them from scratch too.
Yeah, and I had a tracker for everybody too for recruitment pipeline. But what I'll probably do is I'll send a Loom video. It's just a very simple thing that I want to show, so that way you guys know and have an example, something to be able to track. You know, when you're hiring people, very similar to your leads, right? You want to have a CRM where you can see everybody and keep notes. Same thing for obviously people that you're hiring. You want to keep notes and keep track of where everybody's at. So I'll send over a Loom video. I will drop the document for the call as well inside the marketing channel. I do have a hard stop, but if you have any questions, feel free to ask us, let us know, and I'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
All right, see you.
Everybody.
Bye.